If you're watching this video, there's a decent chance that you have given some thought as to how you would play Big Brother if given the chance, and how you might prepare for it going into the season. Would you examine the games of some of Big Brother's best, like Dan or June, to try and replicate their success? Would you watch episode after episode and study up on the competitions to try and learn as many hacks and strategies in order to give yourself the best odds of winning power in the house? Or would you go in knowing practically nothing about the game, yet pick things up in record time and play one of the most dominant and impressive games the show has ever seen? Well, if you chose the last one, you're crazy. And I have just the story for you. Meet Hayden Moss, the champion of today's tale. When it comes to Hayden, many people will often boil down his gameplay to just, he was a good competitor and he had a secret alliance that helped carry him to the end. But that's, to put it frankly, an uninformed take. There is so much more to the story than that, and I would go as far as to say that Hayden was one of the first ever players to successfully pull off being both in a dominant alliance while also playing a somewhat floater hybrid style of game. How did he manage that, and what does that even mean? Let's find out. This is the story of how Hayden Moss won Big Brother 12.
I'm the most competitive person you'll ever meet. And I'm not gonna lie, the ladies love me. That's what's gonna take me far in this game.
If you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we are getting closer and closer to 100,000 subscribers. Thanks. Hayden Moss was a 24-year-old college baseball player from Tempe, Arizona, and as I mentioned, he was not a fan of the show. He was on a flight when a casting director noticed him, thought he'd be a good fit for reality TV, and started the process of recruiting him for a show she was casting for. However, this show was not Big Brother. It was actually Survivor. So, Hayden was all set and ready to go play on Survivor Nicaragua, but at the very last minute, he was replaced and told that they were actually going to put him on a different show, Big Brother. Hayden had never watched Big Brother before though, so while in sequester in the week or so leading up to the move-in, Hayden binged every season of the show to try and learn as much as he possibly could in order to set himself up for success. Watching the show is one thing, but being able to learn and apply what he watched in such a short turnaround time is a huge ask of anybody. But Hayden felt confident in himself, so let's jump into night one and see how the new fan fared.
I am hoping there's gonna be hot girls in the house. However, I would flirt with a gay guy if it meant me staying in the house another week.
Hayden entered the Big Brother 12 house alongside 12 other strangers, and after taking a look at those around him, Hayden felt pretty confident that he would be here to stay for quite a while. When everyone sat down and started doing introductions, one player in particular caught his eye. Kristen. Hayden found Kristen to be super hot, and he hoped that he'd be able to find a way to work with her in the game, and maybe some other stuff too.
Kristen's hot. Every guy dreams about, hooking up with a model. It's gonna take me a week or two, but I'm gonna work my magic.
Before the players went out to compete in the first head of household competition, Julie revealed to the 13 house guests that they had a secret saboteur among them. Someone whose main goal was not to win the game, but to instead sabotage the other house guests throughout the first 5 weeks in order to win $50,000. Based on first impressions, Hayden didn't know who could be the saboteur, but it was something that would be on the back of his mind, and everyone's mind, as they went into their first HOH comp. The competition was played in 2 teams of 6, where the goal was to get your entire team across the yard by hanging onto a giant hot dog one at a time. Each player on the winning team would not only win a cash prize of differing allotments depending on who got across first, but the last player to cross on the winning team would become the first head of household of the season. From watching all of the past seasons, Hayden knew that winning the first HOH was a huge risk, as only one person had ever won the first HOH and gone on to win the game, so he did not want to win it initially. However, during the competition, it became clear that everyone on his team needed his help in order to make it onto the hot dog successfully, and in turn, he was the only player capable of making it onto the hot dog without any assistance. What this means is that if Hayden wanted his team to win, he would have to be the last player to cross, which would crown him the first HOH. It was a tough decision to make, but Hayden quickly weighed the pros and cons and realized that it was a risk he was willing to take. So he made a deal with Matt to keep him safe if he could take the HOH, to which Matt agreed, and after Matt had crossed over, Hayden leapt up and grabbed onto the hot dog, where his red teammates carried him across the yard towards victory, crowning him the first head of household of the season.
I can jump and grab that.
You sure? You're good with that?
Yeah, I can do that. I got you. Save me, please.
Yeah.
I didn't want the HOH, but none of the other competitors on my team were going to be able to get on the hot dog and get across.
Congratulations, Red Team. Congratulations, Hayden.
I won the HOH week 1. It's bittersweet. I got a big target on my back. Huge.
Although it was a risk for Hayden to win this, he recognized that there were a ton of benefits to doing so. For starters, it guaranteed his safety in week 1, which is always a good thing. It also made his team happy because they were each able to walk away with some cash, and Hayden directly helped with that. Also, because Hayden was able to make a deal with Matt, this was an excellent way for him to establish some trust and possibly even a game relationship with him, which would help set Hayden up for some long-term game success. So, although it is a risk to win the first HOH and get blood on your hands so early on in the game, there was a lot for him to gain from it as well.
Who wants to see my HOH room?
One of the things that comes with winning the HOH is the HOH basket, which many of us might overlook, but I have always thought about the potential advantages that can come from it. Maybe you could request a specific item to be placed in your basket that you could then give as a gift to another player in order to try and gain favor with them. Hayden famously got some blue shampoo that certainly would do him no favors as a gift, but if it were me, I would have hoped to have gotten something from Holzkern, the sponsor of today's video. Holzkern is an Austrian-based watch and jewelry company that makes beautiful products for both men and women. Holzkern sent me this necklace that I am absolutely infatuated with. It's something I've been wearing in my day-to-day life, and it's just one of a number of fantastic necklaces that they offer on their website. They also sent me this super sweet leather strap watch that looks so classy and well made. I can tell just by holding it that it was made with very high quality products. One thing that makes Holzkern stand out from the rest is that all of their products are made from natural materials like wood, freshwater pearls, and even peacock feathers, which inherently makes each of their pieces unique. And since Holzkern is a company that's against deforestation, all of the wood that they use is FSC certified. Holzkern also ensures that each item is of a high standard of quality that will last you a very long time, which they're able to do because they aren't just mass producing each item. They're instead made in small quantities. Just so you all know how genuine I am about loving Holzkern, after I received my watch and necklace, I went out of my way to try and order an additional piece with my own money out of pocket to give as a gift to my girlfriend. But Holzkern went above and beyond and just sent it to me anyways. Needless to say, my girlfriend absolutely loves her new necklace, and she told me that it absolutely would have convinced her to work with me in the Big Brother house, making it the perfect gift for any potential alliance partner, or maybe just for someone special in your life. Each product comes with a 2-year warranty, and Holzkern also offers free worldwide shipping on all orders. If you're interested in checking out Holzkern, you can click the link in my description and use my code Ethanimale to get 10% off your purchase store-wide. Be proud to be unique. Thanks again to Holzkern for sponsoring today's video, and with that, let's get back to the Big Brother house. So, after securing his safety, Hayden went to work on making some social relationships in the house, and he was crushing it. Right out the gate, Hayden bonded with Enzo, the Jersey guy, and the two started talking about locking something in. After confirming that they truthfully felt good about each other, they started brainstorming about others who they felt good about, and the two names that came up were Matt and Lane. Hayden already had a deal worked out with Matt, so bringing him in made sense and seemed like a good choice. And Lane was this chill, big muscle country boy who was super easy to get along with, so he'd make a great ally for Hayden as well. The four guys met upstairs in Hayden's HOH room, and they started the process of solidifying a 4-person alliance between them, which they called the Brigade. The four of them each had their own strengths in the game, and they truly felt that as long as they remained loyal to each other, they could legitimately run the table in competitions and obliterate the rest of the house. They each got their own nicknames in the alliance to signify their role in the group, with Matt being the brains, Lane being the beast, Hayden being the animal, and Enzo being the meow meow, whatever that means.
It's gonna be Big Brother history. We are gonna dominate. I thought the Brigade. We're the Brigade, bro. That's the beast. The animal, the brains, meow meow. You know what I mean?
Solidifying this group was extremely beneficial for Hayden's game because he now had a group of players that 100% had his back and could help keep him safe after his HOH reign was over. And he could bounce off some nomination ideas with them. Hayden had noticed that two house guests, Brendan and Rachel, were becoming very close and were starting to get into a showmance, but Brendan was the person Hayden wanted to target. Brendan was on the short list of possible people who could be the saboteur, and he was also the single biggest physical threat outside of the Brigade. So when you add a possible showmance to that too, Brendan became the #1 threat in Hayden's eyes, and the Brigade agreed, so Hayden nominated Brendan and Rachel for Eviction.
As far as the nominations, here's what I'm thinking. All right, so I think put Brendan up. The closest person to him in the house is Rachel.
Brendan and Rachel, I don't really care if they're in a showmance or not. I just don't want them to be aligned together. It's better if, to squash that and get rid of it right away.
I've nominated you, Brendan, and you, Rachel, for Eviction.
Brendan is the target. He's competitive, big threat. Here we go, the game has begun.
This was a pretty big move that Hayden was making. Instead of playing it safe and nominating a non-threat like Kathy, which some people in the house were actually recommending he do, he was taking a big shot and drawing a line in the sand instantly against two pretty big competitors. It showed that Hayden wasn't afraid to make a big move, but what comes with a big move is a big risk, because Brendan and Rachel were coming after him now.
I honestly think that he made a huge mistake for putting up one of the stronger competitors who, if I do not go home, is definitely going to be gunning for him.
Brendan came upstairs and spoke with Hayden after the nominations, and he gave Hayden a short ultimatum. Brendan basically said, hey, we can either get back on the same page, set up some sort of deal, work together to get me off the block, and then form an alliance moving forward, or we don't have to do that, and you can continue targeting me, but I'm going to fight hard to win this veto, and then I'm going to come after you. Hayden could have entertained this idea, and to be honest, he probably should have. But instead, he stuck to his guns and pretty much said he wasn't interested, and that he was going to keep the nominations the same if he won the veto. This was a pretty bold play, but Hayden had already shown that he wasn't afraid to play like that, and in his mind, it made the most sense to keep targeting Brendan, and not make 100 deals this early in the game.
I would love, dude, for you and I come down final two. You pull me off, fuck, dude, I will have your back. I'm giving you my word.
I think if I was to win it right now, I would probably leave him the same.
I would be worried if I was you. If I come off POV, dude, and I'm not on your side, you know?
Yeah, you're coming for me.
Is this guy nuts?
As long as they could stop Brendan from winning the veto, they could get him out of the house before he could do any damage, and Hayden would face minimal repercussions. So going into the veto competition, Hayden was gunning for it big time. Unfortunately, Brendan was gunning for it harder, and Brendan won the veto.
13 letters. Are you kidding me? I am pretty pissed off right now. Brendan's got power in the house now.
This sucked for Hayden. This was not how he wanted his first HOH to go. Brendan was fully safe now. He already stated that he was targeting Hayden in week 2, and to top it all off, Hayden needed to nominate another person. However, Brendan unknowingly made that decision a little bit easier for Hayden. In the conversation Hayden had with Brendan after nominations, I mentioned that Brendan brought up the idea of aligning and working together in the future. In this talk, Brendan suggested forming an alliance consisting of himself, Hayden, and maybe someone like Annie. Boom. A couple days prior, Enzo had informed Hayden that Annie might be working with Brendan and Rachel, but they weren't quite sure. But now Hayden had proof that they weren't just going up against a showmance. They were going up against an alliance of 3, and Annie was that third. After talking with the Brigade, they agreed, not just because of the alliance thing, but also because they thought there was a chance that Annie could be the saboteur.
All right, I would love for it to be like you, me, Annie, and one other person.
He just confirmed what Enzo already told me. Annie, Rachel, and Brendan are in an alliance. We gotta get one of them out of the house.
Annie's a power player.
I'm telling you, she's the best player in this house. I think we need to make a Brigade power move, yo. I think if we put up Annie, Annie goes home.
Now, here's the funny thing. When the players are in the diary room, they'll be asked questions by the producers about their thoughts, their alliances, and in the case of the HOH, who they're thinking about nominating. Supposedly, when Hayden was in the diary room, he felt that the questions he was being asked were formed in a way to lead Hayden away from nominating Annie and towards nominating someone else. However, instead of this working on him, it had the adverse effect, and it made him more suspicious of Annie, and he wanted to nominate her even more. Hayden leveraged this, and he started doing some really impressive work on Brendan. He knew he dropped the ball with Brendan before the veto comp, and now that Brendan was safe and theoretically gunning for him the next week, Hayden wanted to make a deal with him in order to save his own butt. He approached Brendan the day before the veto ceremony and started sharing some information. He explained that he knew Brendan wanted Rachel to stay in the game above all else, and he could help make that happen. Rachel was likely going to be evicted sitting next to pretty much every single person come eviction night. Except for Annie. So he floated the idea to Brendan that maybe they shouldn't let the events of this week ruin things between them, and maybe there was a way for them to work together and potentially leave the door open towards forming an alliance moving forward. In a sign of good faith, Hayden could nominate Annie, as that would be the only way to ensure that Rachel would survive the eviction vote, and in turn, they could keep Hayden safe if they won power the following week. Brendan agreed and warmed up to the idea of secretly working together with Hayden. Just like that, Hayden was back in the good graces of Brendan and Rachel. Hayden found a solution that not only made the Brigade happy, but also kept Brendan and Rachel off of his back, which is really saying something since he started off the week publicly targeting both of them and throwing them on the block. So, at the veto ceremony, Brendan took himself off the block, and Hayden named Annie as the replacement, locking the two nominees in as Annie and Rachel.
This may come as a surprise to some of you, but I have decided to use the power of veto on myself.
Annie. I'm sorry, Annie. I really am.
Lies weave even webs.
Rachel, Annie, eventually they both need to go. Right now, all that matters is keeping the Brigade a secret and keeping it strong.
For someone who had never seen this show until just 3 weeks prior, Hayden was showcasing some serious game chops, and his position in the house was fantastic. He had his 4-person Brigade alliance feeling great with him. He had just smoothed things over with Brendan and Rachel, and to top it all off, he even started getting closer to his night 1 crush, Kristen. Hayden and Kristen started spending a lot of time together in the house, and although they were keeping things lighthearted and slow, their bond was picking up steam, both in a game sense and a personal sense. It was good that Hayden was developing yet another strong game relationship, but he had to be careful. It would only be a matter of time before the other house guests started catching wind of their growing bond, and that type of exposure would not be good for Hayden's game. As long as he was careful though, it might not bite him in the butt.
Mark, I would rather hang out with you than anybody else now. We just can't paint the showman's picture, even if you want to.
Don't get cocky with
I'm
me.
just totally kidding.
I like spending time with Hayden. Hayden and I have very, very good chemistry.
As for the rest of the week, the general consensus was that Annie was the target because she was playing too hard, had been caught trying to make too many alliances, and was overall a bigger threat than Rachel seemed to be. So, come eviction night, the house came together, and by a vote of 10-0, Annie became the first player evicted from the Big Brother 12 house.
Hi there, Lane.
Hey, Julie.
Please cast your vote to evict.
Vote to evict Annie.
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 Annie. Annie.
Annie.
Annie.
Annie.
Annie.
Annie.
By a vote of 10-0, Annie, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
Annie, I think you're great, but you caused a lot of drama. You have a bad temper. That's why you're gone. Adios, Annabelle.
A bit later on, after the fact, the house guests learned that Annie actually was the saboteur, which meant that Hayden's HOH ended up being even more of a success than he initially thought, because now everyone could sleep a little bit easier knowing that the saboteur was out of the game.
Oh my God, Annie's a saboteur. I feel like a freaking king right now. You know, I'm the one that put her up. She's a saboteur and she's out of here. I love it.
Going into the second HOH, Hayden had to sit out and watch as everyone else competed. And one of the more interesting results ended up happening when Rachel won the HOH. Wow. It's a good thing Hayden made up with Brendan and Rachel the week prior, because if he didn't, he'd be in trouble. The crazy thing is that Hayden wasn't just safe with Brendan and Rachel. They actually trusted Hayden more than almost anyone in the house. Rachel got along with Kristen a lot too, so they wanted to form an alliance together consisting of Brendan, Rachel, Kristen, and Hayden. I really don't know how he did it, but Brendan and Rachel thought that Hayden was fully with them, and they let him know early on that he truly had nothing to worry about this week, which was great news for him because that meant that he could chill this week and focus on building his other relationships up even more.
I feel like you saved me. Like, you are the reason I'm here.
My primary concern is staying in the game. Brendan and Rachel need to think that I'm on their side so they don't put me up.
What do you think if me, you, Kristen, and Brendan were together?
And there's not a lot of people I trust, and I do trust you and Kristen. I mean, I would love to for all four of us to go all the way to Final Four.
Hayden continued to work on Kristen, and the two officially formed an alliance together, which was just a good thing for Hayden to solidify. However, that wasn't the only thing solidified between the two. Their flirting had been taken to the next level, and they started spooning and kissing in bed, becoming a full-on secret showmance. They always waited until nighttime as to not become an obvious duo like Brendan and Rachel had, but regardless of how careful they thought they were being, the hills have eyes. Andrew slept in the same bedroom as the two of them, and although he was always asleep by the time they started acting like a showmance, it would only take him being awake one time to blow everything up.
Kristen and I have a secret showman. Nobody needs to know about it. Hopefully nobody will know about it.
Nobody can know that we're as close as we are.
I am developing true feelings for Hayden.
Anyways, now that Hayden knew he was safe, his main goal was to try and keep the Brigade and Kristen off of the block as well. He threw out Brittany's name to Rachel, and luckily for him, Rachel was feeling the same way. She felt that both Brittany and Monet were catty mean girls in the house, and she had her sights on the two of them. Rachel personally wanted to get Monet out though, but that was also fine with Hayden because it kept everyone he cared about in the game safe. So things were looking good once Rachel nominated Brittany and Monet.
I went up to Rachel. My goal is to keep myself safe, keep the Brigade safe, and keep the hottie Kristen off the block. I know for sure if you guys put up Brittany and Monet,
yeah,
that's not going to create waves with anybody.
Hayden gave me a lot of different things to think about. I've nominated you, Monet, and you, Brittany, for eviction.
Brigade is safe. The girl I like is safe. Things are looking up. I couldn't be any happier.
However, Brittany ended up winning the veto, which meant that a replacement nominee would once again be needed. Matt offered himself up as a pawn to Brendan and Rachel, feeling confident that he would have the votes to stay, and also feeling like this would show the Brigade that he genuinely was loyal to them, as it showed that he trusted them enough to stick his neck out on the line for them. The funny thing is, Brendan had actually told Hayden before Matt even volunteered that they were thinking of nominating Matt in Brittany's place anyways. What this showcased is that pretty much everyone felt comfortable sharing their plans with Hayden, solidifying that he was the best positioned player in the house. As for the rest of the week, Brittany used the veto to save herself, Matt went up as the replacement nominee, and then Monet was evicted in a vote of 7-2, with only Kathy and Brittany voting to evict Matt.
Hi there, Hayden.
What's up, Julie?
Please cast your vote to evict.
I vote to evict Monet.
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 Matt. Matt.
By a vote of 7-2, Monet, you've been evicted from the Big Brother house.
Going into the Week 3 HOH, Hayden had no desire to win and make needless enemies in the house, so he threw it pretty early on. Pretty much anyone could have won the HOH, and Hayden would have been in a good spot. But even still, he got a pretty great outcome once Matt, his fellow Brigade member, won the HOH. This kept Hayden guaranteed safe again, so he was chilling. Matt had a good relationship with Reagan, and Matt had heard from Reagan that supposedly Brendan and Rachel wanted to target Hayden and Kristen in the future. I honestly don't even think that this is true, because Brendan never actually said their names to Reagan, and even if he did, it was probably just to blow some smoke in misdirection. But regardless, Matt told Hayden about this, and Hayden and Matt confirmed that Brendan should be the target this week. Although Hayden was probably still in good with Brendan and Rachel, he was in good with most people, and this duo was still the biggest threat in the game, so Hayden wanting Brendan gone made sense for him. However, Matt didn't want to put Brendan and Rachel up initially and thought that it would be better for his personal game to backdoor one of them, so he nominated Kathy and Andrew initially as pawns. The Brigade wasn't too happy about this plan because there was always a chance that something could go wrong and the nominations would stay the same. And that's exactly what happened. Brendan was chosen to play in the veto, and Brendan won the veto. And although he was friends with Andrew, he couldn't take the risk of Rachel being the replacement nominee, so he kept the nominations the same, and Andrew and Kathy remained on the block. Hayden was pissed about this because it was yet another week that both Brendan and Rachel managed to survive, and he felt that Matt's HOH was a total waste now.
Matt, you idiot. You're supposed to be the brains of the operation, and this is your genius plan? Brendan or Rachel could have been going home. Instead, they're both safe. We're screwed.
In a social sense, though, Hayden was still doing very well. He would hang and work out with Lane, which helped solidify that bond past them just being in the Brigade together. And he could shoot the with Enzo, which similarly helped them grow their game relationship past the Brigade. And he would have very intricate game talks with Matt to try and figure out the best way to push the Brigade forward in the house. The main way that they did that was by having what I would call +1s. Each member of the Brigade, except for Enzo, had a person outside of the Alliance that they would become very close to, both on a personal and a game level. Hayden had Kristen, Lane had Brittany, and Matt had Reagan. With these +1s, the Brigade had control of the house, and they could dictate who would go home each week since they had the majority of the votes. So, even though Brendan and Rachel weren't going to get evicted this week, Hayden was still in a great position and was a part of the controlling power structure of the season. It was a toss-up between who would be better to get rid of, between Andrew and Kathy, but in the end, they decided Andrew should be the target, as he was a slightly better competitor than Kathy, and he had a better relationship with Brendan and Rachel. So the Brigade worked their numbers and made sure that the vote landed on Andrew. So things were looking good. However, things were about to take a turn for the worse for Hayden in a big fat 1-2 punch. The first thing was Kristen's fault. Rachel and Kristen started off the game as friends, and they were even working together on a game level. But things started getting a little iffy between them in week 3, and at one point, Rachel asked Kristen if Kristen would put up Brendan and Rachel if she were to win the next HOH, to which Kristen replied, "I don't know. I don't want to, but I know it's what the house wants." Kristen, what are you doing? If she wasn't on Rachel's radar before, she certainly was now. But then, things got 1,000 times worse once we got to the eviction. In a last-ditch effort to possibly try and sway some votes in his favor, Andrew stood up and exposed something crucial in his eviction speech: Hayden and Kristen's relationship. Like I said earlier, all it would take for Andrew to find out about their secret relationship would be for him to be awake one night when Hayden and Kristen were hooking up in bed. And that's what happened.
Hayden and Kristen. I mean, I'm 5 feet away, supposedly sleeping. Who do they think they're fooling?
Andrew wasn't asleep one night and discovered their budding romance, and he outed it to the entire house in his final plea. It wasn't enough to save Andrew, as he was still evicted in a unanimous 8-0 vote, but it was enough to damage Hayden's game. He now had a big fat target on his back, and despite his attempts to deny it, the truth was out there, and was about to go down as we head into this 4th HOH.
Is there someone else in this house that have a stronger relationship? It's a romantic relationship. It's Kristen and Hayden. You need help to get this relationship out. They're kissing, they're doing more. They're upfront about it. You guys are not.
You're full of dude.
Why would I lie? I like Hayden. He's a great guy.
Everything was going perfectly. I had the Brigade in my back pocket, Kristen wrapped around my finger, and he ruined my entire game.
Hello, Hayden.
What's up, Julie?
Please cast your vote to evict.
I vote to evict Andrew.
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 Andrew. By a vote of 8-0, Andrew, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
You represented your faith with honesty and integrity to be in this atmosphere and to remain so faithful. I think you're the man.
With a newly placed target on his back, Hayden geared up for the Week 4 HOH comp, and he actually wanted to win it. Unfortunately for him, he couldn't pull it out, and instead, Rachel won her 2nd HOH of the season. Things were about to get wild. I mentioned before that a bit of dissension was growing between Rachel and Kristen, and after Rachel won the HOH, she called Kristen out with her infamous quote.
Flirters, you better grab a life vest. Kristen.
The two began to bicker before it turned on to a full-on screaming match, and before you knew it, Hayden and Brendan were involved as well. Rachel's new vendetta against Kristen was already bad enough for Hayden's game. But now that Rachel was in power, Andrew had just exposed Hayden's relationship with Kristen, and this giant blow-up just took place, Hayden was in the limelight at the worst possible time. And if Kristen was gonna get nominated, he was now the obvious choice to go up alongside her.
Because you're so smart, Kristen.
Yeah,
I have a fashion degree.
And you are, because you have a chemistry degree. String a sentence together without using the word like, will you? You have zero common sense. Zero.
Oh, I have no common sense.
Zero.
That's why you told her that you would put, if you were up, you would put us up.
Totally, you said that to my face.
When you asked me, I said I wasn't sure, because you know what? I don't lie.
I have this key, and that means I get to make nominations. Okay. Thanks for making my mind up for me.
Hayden lost his cool a little bit during this fight, which is something we gotta dock him for. But Hayden recognized this and realized he needed to do some damage control. He pulled Rachel aside afterwards, apologized for his actions, and took accountability for the things he had done in the game that had gone against Brendan and Rachel.
I'm sorry if I said anything that offended you.
I apologize to Rachel. The purpose was damage control. She's the HOH, man.
That's not me. It was a heated moment.
I know, it was heat of the moment.
This was excellent gameplay by Hayden, and Rachel seemed almost reciprocal in nature. She even came up to Kristen and Hayden shortly after and apologized herself for the things that she said after the HOH comp. But frickin' Kristen had to go and tell her straight to her face that she didn't accept her apology and that it was BS. You could see the pain on Hayden's face as he saw his chances of staying off the block evaporate. He did everything right after the fight in order to minimize the potential backlash, but in 5 seconds, Kristen eradicated any chance of amends being made with Rachel, and it sealed their fate. Rachel nominated Kristen and Hayden at the nomination ceremony, making this the first time this season that Hayden was facing danger.
I just want to apologize for heat of the moment, and
It wasn't heat of the moment. I don't accept your apology. And it's never going to be.
Wrong move, biatch!
What is Kristen thinking? Rachel comes in to apologize and she blows up on her. You're gonna screw us both.
I've nominated you, Kristen, and you, Hayden, for eviction.
Now, you never want to be sitting on the block. But against Kristen, Hayden's odds of surviving were pretty high. Not only was Kristen Rachel's primary target, but Hayden also had the Brigade behind him, and they could easily ensure Hayden's safety. But he still wanted to win the veto to take himself off the block, because, obviously, but also because it would open up the door of potentially being able to keep Kristen in the game this week too. So, going into the veto competition, Hayden was locked in and determined to win. He was performing really well in the competition, making it to the final round against Brittany, but in the end, he came up just short. Not only did Brittany win the power of veto over him, but he ended up with a 24-hour solitary confinement punishment, kicking him while he was already down.
I'd like to trade with Hayden for the power of veto.
I'll see you in 24 hours.
And I'm crushed. Solitary confinement. I was already pissed because I lost the competition. I could be screwed this week.
Although there were slight talks about Brittany possibly using the veto to save Hayden, with Rachel even not caring as long as they could guarantee that Kristen was evicted, Brittany eventually decided not to use it after learning that her buddy Lane might be the replacement. So, Hayden and Kristen were officially locked in as the final nominees, and the secret showmance was about to be dismantled.
Brittany was supposed to pull me off the block and use the veto. Now I'm sitting here next to Kristen. One of us is going home, guaranteed. This sucks, man.
On one hand, this sucked for Hayden. He was still sitting on the block, and even if he survived the vote, he was losing Kristen right before the jury phase began, which meant that he'd not only lose his showman's partner, but he'd be losing someone who he almost had complete game control of, and he'd be losing out on her as a jury vote. But I'd argue that Kristen leaving was something that needed to happen for Hayden to thrive in the house. While Kristen was in fact a number for Hayden, she was also something else, a distraction. The Brigade initially liked the idea of Hayden having Kristen as a number in a game sense, but now that they knew there was a romantic aspect to it, they were starting to get worried that Hayden might become more loyal to her than the Brigade, and that would be terrible for Hayden's game if they thought that. So, to nip it in the butt now is what needed to happen. Also, with Kristen in the game, Hayden would continue to be a target because he'd always be seen as a duo with her. But if you remove Kristen from the house now, that target dissipates and the perception of Hayden changes. He's no longer this out-in-front threat with numbers behind him. Instead, he becomes a useful, free agent that people want to bring in. So, although it was earlier than Hayden would have liked, Kristen had served her purpose for Hayden, and she would start becoming a detriment to him the longer she stuck around. Hayden didn't need to campaign at all this week for the votes because the votes were already there for him. He had 3 votes from the Brigade with Matt, Lane, and Enzo. He had Brittany's vote, courtesy of Lane, and he had Brendan's vote, courtesy of Rachel wanting Kristen out more than anything.
I don't think there's
Well, Brendan's gonna vote to keep you anyway.
Yeah.
I know I have the Brigade's votes, and if I have Brendan's vote, I don't even have to campaign. I can just sit tight and keep my mouth shut.
Eventually, Reagan got on board too, with some help from Matt, as well as recognizing that nobody was interested in keeping Kristen, and that all but ensured Hayden's safety. When eviction night came, only Kathy cast her vote to evict Hayden, but that wasn't anti-Hayden and was more so that she was close with Kristen. So, by a vote of 6-1, Kristen was the 4th person evicted from the Big Brother 12 house in the final pre-juror of the season.
For my position on the block, the last thing I would ever do is throw somebody under the bus. Tonight, as you cast your vote, all I ask is that you vote to keep the person that you truly think will benefit your game the most.
Hi there, Kathy.
Hi, Julie.
Please cast your vote to evict.
I sadly vote to evict Hayden.
Kristen.
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 By a vote of 6-1, Kristen, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
Now, in Hayden's goodbye message to Kristen, he finally told her about the Brigade, but he also told her that if it came down to it, he would have chosen her over them. I truthfully don't know if I fully believe this, but if Hayden was telling the truth here, then it's definitely a good thing that she was gone, because Hayden choosing Kristen over the Brigade would have been a very bad game move. Regardless of the validity of his statement, it didn't matter now. Kristen was out of the house, Hayden survived the block, and it was time for him to get his head back in the game. With only 9 people left, the jury phase officially kicked off, and with it, the start of the mid-game.
Matt, Enzo, Lane, and myself are in an alliance, but if I would have had to choose between you and the Brigade, I would have chosen you. Goodbye.
Going into the 5th HOH, Hayden wanted nothing more than to win the competition, seize power, and send Brendan or Rachel home once and for all. Hayden made it quite far into the HOH comp, making it down to the final 3 players in the Endurance Challenge. But in the end, his arms gave out and he fell. Fear not though, because once again, Matt pulled it out and won his 2nd HOH of the season. With Matt in power, Hayden could breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that he was as safe as could be. But he was hell-bent on making sure that Matt did not make the same mistake as last time when it came to nominations.
The Brigade is back in power, baby. Matt is a monster. But you know what? He better not screw up the nominations this time, because if he does, we're kicking him out of the Brigade.
Hayden and the rest of the Brigade made it clear that they could not fool around with the back door this time. Brendan and Rachel had to go on the block initially, and Matt agreed, so he nominated the duo for eviction. As long as neither of them won the veto, then one of them would finally be evicted after 5 weeks in the house. And luckily for Hayden, they didn't win the veto, and instead, Brittany did. This was Brittany's 3rd veto win of the season, and she was proving to be an under-the-radar comp threat, but that's besides the point. Despite many efforts from Brendan and Rachel, Brittany chose not to use the veto and to keep nominations the same, which put Brendan and Rachel in the exact same position that Hayden and Kristen were the week prior. Now, Hayden could have just kicked back, laughed in the face of Brentel's demise, and had a good time. But that's not what a good game player would do. Instead, he had different plans. The Brigade felt the need to continue having influence all across the house, and whether or not they liked it, that included Brendan and Rachel too. Enzo had already started developing a pretty good relationship with the couple, but Hayden actually joined in on this too. Somehow, for the 2nd time this season, Hayden worked his magic and actually made some progress in getting Brendan and Rachel to trust him again. For all they knew, Hayden was a free agent, and now that they were clearly on the bottom, they were desperate to cling onto any lifeline that would have them, and Hayden was there to extend his helping hand. Hayden and Enzo worked hard to gain the trust and confidence of Brendan and Rachel, and their efforts paid off. When Brendan and Rachel were discussing with each other what to do after one of them was evicted, they both said that the main people they felt they could trust were Enzo and Hayden. This is something about Hayden's game that has to be highlighted. His innate ability to win over his enemies and make them trust him in the game, even though they definitely shouldn't. Hayden didn't actually want to work with Brendan or Rachel long term, but he wanted to keep all of his bases covered, not just for the Brigade's sake, but for his own sake. Plus, if he kept playing nice with them, that could be 2 votes for him on the jury. When it came to the decision on which member of the showmance to keep, Hayden and the Brigade talked and came to the conclusion that it would be best if they sent Rachel home. During this week, Brendan tried to sacrifice his game for Rachel, and he did so by fighting and arguing with as many people as possible in the hopes that he would get voted out and Rachel could keep on going in the game. However, this had the opposite effect. Hayden wanted to keep Brendan in the game because he had made himself such a massive target due to his tirades. And since they also felt that Rachel was the better HOH competitor, it made sense to take her out now and then let Brendan be a shield for them in the coming weeks. So, the decision was made to take out Rachel this week, and in turn, Hayden and Enzo pulled Brendan in and made an alliance with him moving forward. What was the goal of this alliance though? Well, let's talk about it. Now that Hayden lost his +1 inside the Brigade, he spent a lot more time with Enzo, the other player without a +1 in the alliance, and the two of them really solidified their bond. They began talking about how they not only wanted to keep Brendan in the game, but they actually wanted him to win the next HOH, because they wanted him to target Brittany and Reagan. Hayden was getting worried at how close Lane and Matt were getting with Brittany and Reagan, who were their respective +1s, and that they might choose them over the Brigade. So Brittany and Reagan were on Hayden's radar now, and the hope was that by making this alliance with Brendan, it would not only keep him and Enzo safe, but they could also influence Brendan to target the remaining +1s if he managed to win that next HOH. Then, whoever was left of those two would be gunning hard for Brendan, and the best case scenario would be for Brendan and whoever's left of Brittany or Reagan to be evicted in the subsequent 2 weeks.
Right now, I'm trusting Hayden the most because our other 2 Brigade members have a side alliance and they might be getting in too deep. We'll make a side alliance, me, Brendan, and Hayden.
If I win HOH, it has to be Brittany and Reagan. We go into this thing and battle it out. Oh, for sure. Are you kidding me?
This would be a pretty sweet boot order for Hayden, as that would make the final 5 the 4 Brigade guys plus Kathy, who was someone that Hayden sneakily built a good relationship with as well, and he would be in an excellent spot to win the game. But Hayden started thinking that maybe making it to the end with all the Brigade members wasn't necessarily the best thing for his game. Hayden was good with both Lane and Enzo, and he was wanting to go to the end with those 2 for sure. But Matt? Maybe not so much. Matt had opened a Pandora's box during this week, and he claimed that he received a measly $1 as his prize. But Hayden and Enzo simply didn't believe that Matt was being honest with them. They thought that he was hiding something. So, when you combine that with the fact that Matt was a very intelligent player and had shown that he could win multiple HOHs, the thought of him getting anywhere close to the endgame was getting very scary. Hayden tested the waters a little bit with the other Brigade members, and he found that they felt the same way. So, for the first time, we were starting to see some division within the Brigade. The 3 guys decided that Matt was expendable to them. Although they weren't going to go out of their way to target Matt at this point, he would be the first of them to go when the time came. It was subtle, but Hayden had just made himself the best position player inside the Brigade. That was a lot of information all at once, but long story short, Hayden was making moves this week, and he was presumably in the best spot in the entire house.
I haven't told anybody how I really feel about Matt. He's competitive, he wins competitions, he's smart. Basically, the other side of the house, they're all snakes, and Matt, he's the head of the snake.
Eviction night soon approached, and just as planned, Rachel was evicted in a unanimous vote of 6-0 to become the first member of the jury.
Hi there, Hayden.
What's up, Julie?
Please cast your vote to evict.
I vote to evict Rachel.
Rachel.
Rachel. Rachel.
Rachel.
Rachel.
By a vote of 6-0, Rachel, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
Unfortunately, your showmance with Brendan is what got you kicked out. But you know what? If what you guys have is real, like you tell me, it's probably gonna be worth a lot more than $500,000.
Going into the final 8 HOH, Hayden had his fingers crossed that Brendan could pull out the win. And it wasn't even close. Brendan crushed the HOH competition and was crowned the final 8 head of household. Because of the deal that Hayden had made with Brendan to work together moving forward, this was a great outcome for him, because now he could try and influence Brendan to go after the people that Hayden was concerned about. After talking with Enzo, Hayden decided that he wanted Brittany to be the target, because with her out of the way, they could fully reel Lane back into their corner.
We have to get rid of either Brittany or Reagan this week.
I think we get rid of Brittany. Then Lane comes back to us 100%. We need to tell Brendan.
Hayden went upstairs to talk to Brendan, and although Brendan initially said he was thinking about putting up Brittany and Reagan, which would have been great, he started leaning towards putting up the duo of Brittany and Lane. Hayden tried persuading Brendan away from nominating Lane, but it didn't seem to be working. Although it would suck to have Lane on the block, Hayden had the numbers to vote out Brittany regardless. And since she was who Hayden wanted gone this week, I guess Lane going up with her wasn't the worst thing in the world. But then, at nominations, seemingly out of nowhere, Brendan nominated Lane and Reagan. What? Where the hell was Brittany? Well, supposedly, Brendan was forbidden from nominating Brittany by production. There's technically a rule that, as the HOH, you're not allowed to explicitly tell someone that they're going up on the block. It's almost never, ever enforced, but I guess Brendan told Brittany that she was going up, and production actually stepped in and enforced the rule, telling him that he was no longer allowed to nominate her because of it. I don't know if this has ever been 100% confirmed, but I think the general consensus is that this is what happened. Regardless of the reasonings, it didn't really matter. Brittany wasn't on the block, and Lane and Reagan were instead. Reagan was someone that Hayden wanted to target soon anyways due to his close bond with Matt, so as long as Reagan didn't win the veto, they could just vote him out this week and deal with Brittany at a later time. But Hayden's plans came crashing down once Reagan, against all odds, pulled out the veto win. Damn. There goes that plan. Hayden's ideal week had been thrown off course time and time again, but Hayden figured, why not embrace it? Hayden continued to lose trust in Matt throughout the week, as he saw how close Matt was getting to Brittany on top of his already established connection with Reagan, and it got to the point where he even admitted to Enzo that he trusted Brendan more than Maddie. So, Hayden suggested, why don't we take out Matt this week? There were only so many replacement nominee options, and if Matt ended up on the block next to Lane, they'd be forced to lose a Brigade member regardless. So why not use the opportunity to get a huge threat like Matt out?
Like, I know this sounds stupid, but I almost trust Brendan more than Maddie. If Brendan puts up Matt, Matt goes home, me and you were looking a lot better.
Well, it just so happened that Brendan was thinking along the same lines, even without Hayden pushing this. And after Reagan used the veto to save himself, Brendan named Matt as the replacement, finalizing Lane and Matt as this week's nominees. Even though Hayden knew that getting rid of Matt was the best game move, it did still hurt him on an emotional level that the Brigade had to be broken up. Like, he genuinely was a bit torn up that both Matt and Lane were on the block together. Hayden and Enzo solidified with Lane all week long that they were keeping him and that it was them three to the end. But Hayden even went a step further. When Enzo wasn't there, Hayden talked to Lane about how it's them two to the end, even over Enzo, and that they need to stick together as a duo. Hayden was playing hard, and now he had both Enzo and Lane, thinking that he was their #1 ally till the end.
I know I'm safe this week, so I'm looking towards the end. I'm making deals with everybody this week just to make sure that my butt is safe going into the next round.
I know I hang out with Enzo a lot, but you know how I feel. I'm taking you. I hope it's the same with you.
Hayden and Enzo went back and forth all week on when to tell Matt that they were cutting him, but there was one thing that was somewhat stopping them from doing so. Matt was seemingly bringing up the fact that there might exist a power that could save the Brigade this week. Hayden instantly clocked that this was Matt saying he more than likely had some sort of power, probably from the Pandora's box from the week prior. So because of this uncertainty, Hayden figured it would be best to just not reveal to Matt that the Brigade was turning on him. However, just 2 hours before the eviction, they decided that they should probably not blindside him, and that it would be better to just tell him that they were voting him out because they didn't even know if Matt actually had a power, let alone what this power could even do. So Hayden straight up told Matt that he was going to vote him out because Matt was such a good player and he would lose in the final two sitting next to him.
I'll be completely honest up front, and this sucks, but if it's me sitting against you in the end, you're gonna beat me. I'm here, I need to play to win.
It sucks, bro.
However, this very quickly became a very scary thing, because once the eviction actually came, Matt stood up and announced that he wasn't going anywhere because he secretly had a diamond power of veto that would not only allow him to remove himself from the block, but he could also name the replacement nominee, not Brendan.
Better luck next time, you big dummy, because I'm gonna use the diamond power of veto tonight to save myself.
In this moment, Hayden's heart stopped. He literally just told the guy that he was voting him out because he saw him as a threat. And if Matt wanted to, he could officially turn on the Brigade, which is something he was legitimately thinking about doing. And he could choose to nominate Hayden. In this instance, sitting next to Lane on the block, I think Hayden might actually get evicted. There were only 5 people voting. Brittany would keep Lane, Matt presumably would be voting out Hayden since he'd be the one making this move, and with Matt might come Reagan. So, if Matt wanted to, he could have nominated Hayden, blown up the Brigade, and Hayden possibly gets evicted in a close 3-2 vote.
Oh man, Maddie just threw Enzo and I a curveball. We had just told him we're sending him home. We're screwed.
But this isn't what Matt chose to do. Even with the Brigade telling Matt that he was a goner, I think that Matt was still holding on to this idea that the Brigade could be the most dominant alliance in Big Brother history that he had always dreamed of, and that they could still make it to the Final Four together. So instead of taking a shot at Hayden or Enzo, Matt nominated Kathy. Hayden dodged a major bullet here, and he knew it too. But I can't really fault him all that much, because how could he have prepared for Matt to have this power that had never been seen before on Big Brother? Also, for what it's worth, Matt actually respected Hayden a lot for telling him straight to his face that he was going to vote him out. Enzo was also there when Hayden told Matt this, but Enzo was beating around the bush and not giving him a straight answer, which Matt didn't really like. So, in a theoretical normal week, Hayden managed Matt perfectly well here. He just didn't anticipate the repercussions if Matt had a secret diamond power of veto, which, like, come on, he wasn't really supposed to be able to see that coming. So, in the end, maybe Hayden's straightforwardness helped to save him, and Kathy took the nomination seat instead.
The diamond power of veto actually gave me a great insight into people's minds in the house. Hayden was real straight up with me, but Enzo was beating around the bush a lot, and it's like, come on, guys. Some cleanup that needs to be done next week. Kat, I'm so sorry. Got a job to do.
With a non-Brigade member on the block, keeping Lane was even more of a no-brainer than before, and Kathy was sniped out of the game in 8th place in what had to be the most chaotic 15 minutes of the season.
Hello, Hayden.
Grenade, Julie!
I know. Expect the unexpected.
Wow.
Please cast your vote to evict.
I vote to evict Kathy.
Kathy!
Kathy.
Kathy, the sheriff.
By a vote of 5-0, Kathy, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
It may have been bumpy, but Hayden made it through the round, and he knew he had to do some serious damage control with Matt following the next HOH comp.
Less than an hour ago, the Brigade was going to send me home, and now they're glad that I'm staying? That's very suspicious behavior.
Going into the final 7 HOH, Hayden probably wanted to win this one, given the Matt grenade that had just been dropped on him. But it didn't matter if he wanted it or not, because he lost on the very first question, and Brittany came away with the win. Brittany being in power was not something that Hayden was necessarily thrilled about, because she was someone who he wanted gone soon, but he had to play nice to try and keep himself off the block. Brittany wanted to target Brendan first and foremost, so she nominated Brendan and Enzo for eviction, with Enzo being the pawn. The Brigade wanted Matt to go up, but Brittany's main priority was getting Brendan out. Lane worked on Brittany throughout the beginning of the week though, and finally found a middle ground, where Brittany would still target Brendan, but if he happened to win the veto, then she was on board to put up Matt and send him home.
If Enzo or Brendan come off the block, it's time to make a power move. We have to get Matt up there and try and backdoor him.
Lane, thinking that Hayden was his #1 guy, also made sure to put in some good words on Hayden's behalf while talking with Brittany. So much so that Brittany actually proposed a final 3 deal with her, Lane, and Hayden. In a way, Hayden was playing a hybrid floater game, and it was really working out for him. His true loyalties always remained with the Brigade, other than that, but each week he was out there making deals with whoever was in power. First it was Rachel, then it was Brendan, and now it was Brittany. He was floating to whoever could keep him safe while still having his roots planted with the Brigade, and it was working out beautifully. Anyways, going into the veto, Brendan ended up coming away with the win, which was great on one hand, because Hayden wanted to keep Brendan in the house to go after Reagan and Brittany down the road. And this opened up the door for Brittany to get rid of Matt. But at the same time, if Brittany backed out of the Matt plan, then Hayden would be the replacement nominee next to Enzo. Luckily for Hayden, he had basically everyone in the house on his side, and everyone outside of Reagan was pushing for Matt to be the replacement. Brittany herself even admitted that she didn't want to put Hayden up for the simple fact that she really liked him. Matt sealed his own fate, though, once he made one last attempt to keep the Brigade intact by pushing for Brittany to nominate his supposed closest ally in the House, Reagan.
Matt thinks he's still part of the Brigade. Sorry, Matt, you're not. You're telling us to go upstairs and push for Reagan. Well, guess what? The Brigade is gonna go upstairs and push for you, Matt.
Brittany told Reagan that Matt threw him under the bus, and at this point, Matt's fate was sealed. Everyone was on board for him to go, and that's exactly what happened. Brendan took himself off the block, Brittany named Matt the replacement nominee over Hayden, and despite his best efforts, Matt knew he was a goner. Eviction night approached, and Matt was evicted in a unanimous vote of 4-0, becoming the third member of the jury.
Hi there, Hayden.
What's up, Julie?
Please cast your vote to evict.
I vote to evict Matt.
Matt.
By a vote of 4-0, Matt, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
With that, we not only head into the final 6, which is what I consider to be the start of the end game, but we also head into a double eviction.
Julie comes on the monitor and tells us today is double eviction. My stress level went through the roof. I went from being safe to not being so safe in a hurry.
Before we jump right into the final 6, let's talk about Hayden's endgame plans. During the prior week, Hayden spoke to the cameras and laid out that his preferred boot order from here on out would be for Reagan to leave in 6th, Brendan to leave in 5th, Brittany to leave in 4th, and then for Enzo to leave at 3rd, meaning that Hayden wanted to sit in the final 2 against Lane. Now, Hayden seemingly had a better connection with Enzo than he did with Lane, but he was worried that Enzo's incredible social game would earn him the win no matter who he was up against at the final 2. So Hayden made the tentative decision in this moment that he would choose Lane over Enzo at the final 3, simply because he felt like he could beat Lane and he couldn't beat Enzo. However, Hayden actually had to get to the final 3 in order for that decision to matter. So going into this double eviction, Hayden had every intention to win and to try and get rid of Reagan. The HOH comp was a quick sprint and dig event, and for the first time since week 1, Hayden won the competition, becoming the final 6 HOH. Hayden nominated Reagan and Brendan, hoping that Reagan would lose the veto, but of course, Reagan managed to pull a rabbit out of his hat and he won the veto to save himself. This meant that Hayden had to settle for his backup plan, and even though he didn't initially want Brendan to go, he knew that Brendan could be a big threat in his endgame, and it was his time. So, Hayden named Brittany as the replacement in order to keep the Brigade safe, and Brendan was evicted in a unanimous vote of 3-0.
Hayden making his way down. Congratulations, Hayden.
I win this HOH competition, and I am so excited right now. It's unbelievable.
I nominate Brendan and Reagan.
Brendan has my back, so why do I want to evict him? Well, I don't. I'm planning on voting Reagan out of the house.
Congratulations, Reagan. You have won the power of veto.
As a replacement nominee, I choose Brittany.
Hi there, Enzo.
Hey, Julie.
Please cast your vote to evict.
I vote to evict Brendan.
Brendan.
By a vote of 3-0, Brendan, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
Brendan was the pawn, and Brendan thought that I was in his corner. Sorry, dude. Sometimes the pawn goes home. We all know that. Sucks to be you.
The double eviction didn't go exactly how he planned it to, but at the end of the day, the Brigade had made it to the final 5, and Hayden was only a few rounds away from making it to the end.
I guaranteed my spot in the final 5. That's 20% chance at $500,000. Unreal.
Going into the final 5 HOH, Hayden had to sit on the sidelines and cross his fingers, hoping that Lane or Enzo might finally win a damn competition. Because if they didn't, the Brigade could be in big trouble. But finally, Hayden could rely on a Brigade member not named Matt, because Lane won the final 5 HOH. It's at around this time that Hayden and Lane really solidified their final 2, which couldn't come at a better time because Lane was the HOH. In a perfect world, Lane would keep his 2 Brigade brothers off of the block and nominate Reagan and Brittany. But Lane made it clear very early on that he wasn't going to nominate Britt initially. This meant that Lane was going to nominate a Brigade member alongside Reagan. But because of his final 2 deal, Lane chose to keep Hayden safe, and he nominated Enzo next to Reagan. As long as Reagan didn't win the veto, then things would be great. And guess what? Reagan didn't win the veto. Instead, Enzo won, which also marked his first comp win of the season. Even though the plan was still for Reagan to go, this made for an interesting dilemma. Lane had to choose between Hayden and Brittany. Even though Lane had his final two with Hayden, Brittany was like the closest person to him in the house, and Lane was worried that if he put Brittany on the block next to Reagan, Hayden and Enzo would flip the vote and send Brittany home, which, to be fair, actually was something Hayden and Enzo were considering. This would be terrible for Lane's game, and in his head, he knew that if he put up Hayden next to Reagan, Reagan would for sure be evicted. So, after Enzo took himself off the block, Lane actually nominated Hayden instead of Brittany.
The person I nominate is Hayden.
While this is certainly not a great thing that Hayden was on the block at the final 5, he saw it coming, and he was admittedly as safe as could be. Both Enzo and Lane thought that they had final 2 deals with Hayden, so they weren't going to evict him, and even though Brittany considered voting Hayden out, Lane helped sway her back aboard the hay train, so he was totally fine, albeit a tad bit frustrated that Lane put him on the block in an avoidable situation. Eviction night soon came, and the Brigade and Brittany stayed loyal to Hayden, allowing him to survive the block for the second time this season, and resulting in Reagan's unanimous eviction in 5th place.
Hi, Brittany.
Hey, Julie.
Please cast your vote to evict.
I sadly vote to evict my dear friend, Reagan.
Reagan.
By a vote of 2-0, Reagan, you've been evicted from the Big Brother house.
The last couple of weeks, the odds have been against you, and you fought. You're an awesome representative of the gay community, and a lot of young people can look up to you. That's right, baby. Final 4, we're taking it down. Brigade, Final 3 coming up next.
Going into the Final 4, there was one thing on Hayden's mind. Brittany could not win this HOH. If she did, it would guarantee that a Brigade member would go home, and Hayden really wanted to sit in the Final 3 with them. So heading into this HOH comp, Hayden wanted to win more than anything. The competition began, and it quickly became clear that both Brittany and Enzo were not winning this competition, and Hayden won the Final 4 HOH with ease.
Hayden has a star.
I'm the HOH, 1 in 3 shot at $500,000.
I'm keeping this key. You get a new one.
This not only guaranteed himself a spot in the Final 3, but this was also his 3rd HOH win of the season, meaning that Hayden was starting to build up a competitive resume, and he was picking up steam at the perfect time. Initial nominations at the Final 4 don't matter all that much, so Hayden ended up nominating the last visible pair in the game, Lane and Brittany, but everyone in the house was cool with this because they knew what really mattered was the veto. This was, by far, the most important veto of the summer. If Hayden won it, then the Brigade was in the Final 3. But if Brittany won it, she was evicting Enzo. And then Hayden would have to beat her in the final HOH if he wanted to be sitting in the end. Hayden had been studying though, so even though the stakes were high, he felt ready. The players went out into the backyard, the veto competition began, and Hayden won.
I just killed that out there. I control the nominations. I control the veto meeting. Who goes with me to the Final 3?
This was Hayden's first veto win of the season, and it could not have come at a better time. He now held all the power in his hands, and Brittany's fate was pretty much sealed. With no reason not to at this point, the 3 guys finally let the cat out of the bag.
Do you think there was an alliance in this house?
Yeah, Brendan and Rachel.
I was in an alliance.
With Maddie.
There was 2 other people too.
With you and Maddie? Was it Lane?
Who was it, Lane? It was Lane and Hayden from day 2.
Are you pissed?
So yeah, so I'm definitely going home.
I'm not gonna use the veto.
It's okay. I'm just gonna go downstairs. I just got completely played. I mean, how does it feel to know that you just wasted 3 months and you have no shot at $500,000?
Brittany was very upset to hear that her game was practically over, but that's Big Brother for you. Hayden and Enzo never really wavered from their decision to bring Lane to the end, so when eviction night approached, Enzo cast the sole vote to evict Brittany, meaning that the Brigade had completed their goal and now were the only players left in the house. There was only one more round to go, and the only thing that stood in Hayden's way from the final 2 chairs was one last HOH comp.
I'm so sorry, Brittany. I have to evict you.
I didn't want to do this to you, but I promised these guys that I would try and take them to the end. I feel like I betrayed you. I feel like I let you down. Honestly, that's the last thing I wanted to do.
Lane, Enzo, Hayden. To give you an idea of where everyone stood, here's what each player would have done in the event that they won the final head of household. If Hayden won, he was going to take Lane to the end, out of fear that he couldn't beat Enzo. If Lane won, he was going to take Hayden to the end because he wanted to honor his final 2 deal, and he was also worried that he'd lose to Enzo. And if Enzo won, he was also going to take Hayden to the final 2. What this meant is that it didn't matter who won the final HOH. Unless something crazy happened in this final round, Hayden was going to be sitting in the final 2. And that's thanks to his very impressive social management of both of the other Brigade members. However, this didn't mean that Hayden had locked up the win. In his mind, he still needed Enzo to lose the final HOH in order to ensure that Enzo wasn't sitting in the end next to him. Luckily for Hayden, Enzo wasn't a great competitor, and that carried into this final round. Hayden won part 1 and Lane won part 2, which eliminated Enzo from contention and guaranteed that either Hayden or Lane would become the final HOH. During this time, Hayden and Lane confirmed that their final 2 deal was still on, making it so that they would be the last 2 Brigade members standing.
This is huge, man. We're in the final 3. We're in the final 2. Brittany said Enzo makes the final 2, he'll win unanimous decision.
But Hayden still desperately wanted to win this HOH. It would not only cement Hayden's competitive dominance over Lane, as it would give him 5 comp wins to Lane's 1, but it would also tie Hayden for the single season HOH record with 4. So once finale night approached and it was time to begin part 3, Hayden was locked in. The competition began, and in a very close quiz that came down to a tiebreaker, the winner of the final HOH was Hayden.
250, which means congratulations, Hayden. You are the final.
He had done it. Hayden had 100% locked in his spot in the final 2, and all he had to do now was decide who would be there with him. Hayden stood up, told the 2 nominees that no matter what happened, they would be Brigade brothers for life, and officially announced that he was choosing to evict Enzo.
No matter what's done here, I think we're going to be friends for a long, long time. With that being said, Enzo, I'm sorry, man. I have to evict you. You're the best social player ever in Big Brother history, and you're a huge threat to win the game if you're sitting in the final 2. I need to do what's best, for me to have a chance at winning $500,000.
Just like that, Enzo became the final member of the jury, and the final 2 was set in stone. The last person standing between Hayden and $500,000 was Lane. Going into the jury questions, Hayden felt like he had a pretty big advantage over Lane. But Lane was a very sociable, funny guy, and his comedic humor could make him an easy person to root for in the jurors' eyes. So Hayden knew he had to give it his all and really lay out specific reasons as to why he deserved to win. He buttered up some of the jurors, highlighting how competitive Brendan, Rachel, and Brittany were in the game, and how he would have liked to see them in the final 2 if he wasn't there himself. He told Kathy that although Lane had a good social game, he had an equally good one. So if you wanted to look for a way to differentiate the 2 finalists, you should look at their competition records. And then, to close it off, he laid all of his cards on the table as he gave his final speech. He said that the winner of the season should be the player that played the best, and that was him. He and Lane were equal in a social sense, but he crushed him in a competitive sense. And the competitions that he won were all important because they were the ones that helped push the Brigade into the final 3. He did kind of ramble a bit towards the end, but then he wrapped it all up by saying he truly did believe that he was the best player sitting in the final 2, and that they should vote for him because of it.
You guys, the jury, the winner should be the person who played the game the best. I feel like I deserve to win this game. I really do. When it comes down to competitions, I won 5. Lane won 1. I won the veto that carried the Brigade into the final 3, and I was a genuine guy. I treated everybody with the absolute respect that they deserve. The bottom line is, if you're voting on who the best player is, it's me, and I really do believe that.
Overall, he did a pretty good job in this jury questioning segment, and although he kind of faltered at some parts, Lane dropped the ball big time with his questions, which should have helped sway any undecided jurors in Hayden's direction. At this point, Hayden's game was complete. The power now laid in the hands of the 7-person jury, and one by one, they each locked in their votes for a winner.
My decision's probably gonna be between who needs a haircut, who needs a shave. That's what I'm going with.
After saying hi to the pre-jurors for like 15 minutes, it was finally time to reveal the vote, and it takes 4 votes to win. Rachel voted for Lane. Kathy voted for Hayden. Matt voted for Hayden. Brendan voted for Lane. Reagan voted for Hayden. Brittany voted for Lane. That was 3 votes for Hayden, 3 votes for Lane. 1 vote left, and it was Enzo's. Enzo, with the final vote, voted for Hayden. By a super close 4-3 vote, Hayden Moss was crowned the winner of Big Brother 12.
Kathy has cast her vote for Hayden. Matt's vote goes to Hayden. Reagan's vote goes to Hayden. And the winner of Big Brother is... Congratulations, Hayden. You are the winner of Big Brother.
From start to finish, Hayden played a truly impressive and dominant game. But he did so in a non-traditional way, where he also floated to those in power and made additional deals and alliances for further protection. At the start of the game, he came out of the gate swinging by winning the first HOH, joining up with the Brigade, and taking a big shot against Brendan and Rachel. He should have been in big trouble when they both survived and Rachel won the next HOH, but Hayden worked his way back into Brentel's good graces and avoided nomination. Although he took a hit when his relationship with Kristen was outed and the two were put on the block together, it actually ended up being a positive turning point for him. Because from Kristen's eviction onwards, he had absolutely nothing to distract him, and every single person in the house wanted to make a deal with Hayden to go to the endgame with him. And around the final 8, Hayden started putting in the work to turn on Matt, the Brigade member that Hayden viewed as his biggest threat, and that work paid off as Matt was evicted the very next round at the final 7. From this point on, Hayden dominated the competitions, winning 3 of the last 4 HOHs and the final power of veto in order to get himself to the end of the game. But he didn't even need to. In general, Hayden never had to win a competition for safety. It was always for power and to try and push his game forward, to which he succeeded almost every time. Once Hayden got to the final 3 with Lane and Enzo, he already had the game on lock. Not only were both of those guys going to take Hayden to the final 2, but Hayden actually would have beaten both of them. So, all those worries about Enzo's excellent social game were for naught, meaning that once Hayden won that final POV to ensure that Brittany left, he had $500,000 in the bag. However, we do need to talk about that final vote. Going into the final 2, Hayden actually expected to beat Lane in a vote of 6-1, but as we saw, it was a lot closer than that. Hayden had the better relationship with Brendan and Rachel than Lane did, and Hayden figured with how competition-focused that couple was, they'd respect Hayden's competition dominance as well and reward him with their jury votes. So what happened? Well, the answer is really stupid. Very early on in the season, there was a less than flattering nickname that Enzo made for Brendan that he would use behind his back to make fun of him. However, Rachel and Brendan eventually found out about it, but were told that Hayden made up the nickname, which turned them off from wanting to reward him with the win. Do you hear how ridiculous that is? At the end of the day, the better player still won in the end. But can you imagine if Enzo felt too burned by Hayden at the end and also voted for Lane, making Lane the winner? That would have been a crazy timeline. For what it's worth, Brendan and Rachel have both come forward and said that they now regret voting for Lane and wish that they had voted for Hayden. It doesn't matter now, but I think it's worth a little something.
I just don't see how they had this big strategic plan that none of us saw. If they were so strategic, why did I win 2 HOHs?
At the end of these videos, I like to give the winner a score out of 10 to sum up their gameplay on the season as a whole. And Hayden's gonna get a better score than I anticipated coming into this. His game awareness, maneuverability, and adaptiveness really impressed me throughout the entirety of the season. And it really felt like there was no person in that house that Hayden couldn't work his way in with. Also, considering the fact that Hayden didn't even know what Big Brother was until like 2 weeks before going into the house is ridiculous. But his game wasn't all smooth sailing. Although he tried to be careful, he wasn't careful enough with his relationship with Kristen, and once that was exposed to the house, that did put a big target on his back and resulted in him going on the block. Also, although very unlikely, there does exist a world where Lane and Brittany turn on Hayden at the final 5 and evict him, which should have been avoidable because he was supposed to have a final 2 with Lane, yet Lane put him on the block instead of Brittany. However, in the grand scheme of things, those are pretty tame negatives. So, overall, I am going to give Hayden an 8.9 out of 10 on the winner scale. It was a dominant, well-rounded game, and although it lacked flashiness, it was deadly effective, and it ended up earning him the crown.
Do you think you played a better social game than the man seated next to you?
I would say our social game's almost similar. What separated me is the competitions.
That wasn't the question, but you let it slip on in there, Hayden.
And there we go. As we're closing out this season of Big Brother 26, get ready for the winner videos to come more frequently. My current plan is to have a video for the Big Brother 26 winner released sometime in either late October or early November. Then after that, it'll finally be the one many of you have been begging me to do. Maggie Osborne, the winner of Big Brother 6. And there might be a surprise winner video in there too, so I've got a lot in store for you all. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I, of course, need to give that extra special shout out to all of my YouTube members and patrons who would have absolutely steamrolled the Brigade if they played on Big Brother 12. And, as always, here's a clip for you on your way out.
Yeah! This guy got 2 left feet over here.
I told you that already. I can't dance at all.
This kid can't dance for nothing.
We've had some good time this season.
That's what she said.
Who says that? Who is she?
We went 70 days in this place, man. He still doesn't understand. He don't get it.
Dude, Reagan hurls his CD and both the Clam and Enzo take it right in the face. What a sore loser.